Okay, I'm going to try and talk as little as possible today. I should introduce myself. My name's Leah. I am the Director of Product and Content Marketing here at Encircle, and I'm excited to be the moderator for this webinar today. But I'm going to turn things over soon to our experts to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive right in. We've divided this session into 7 discussion topics, and we'll spend about 10 minutes on each topic before we move on. With each one, the goal is to give you at least one tangible takeaway. So something that you can leave here with and go away and take action in your own business. So we're going to get started with some quick introductions to our expert panelists. One second. Now you can see everyone. So I'm gonna start with Jeremy. Jeremy is from ATI, and he has recently written an article for CNR magazine. And I think Kristen is going to throw that up into a resource so you can download that if you'd like. So Jeremy, I'll get you to introduce yourself first. And so tell us about yourself, your experience with program work, and then we'll introduce ourselves to the rest of the panelists.
Okay, great. Thanks, Leah. Thanks for having me. And join sharing just some insights on the TPA side of the business. I grew up in a restoration business, a family business, and as my dad and uncle decided to exit, I stayed on with that firm as a partner and grew our locations from 3 to 17 on the premise of greenfielding and TPA business. And after I exited that business, I went ahead and started again, which was Jenkins Enterprises, and was able to grow that to 2 locations. And approximately 2 years ago, Jeff Moore and ATI Restoration, they were looking for a foothold here in the Washington, D.C. marketplace. And so we joined the ATI family in 2023. I did the last 2 ventures through the TPA business and understanding how to come in and run at a high level within the metrics side of the game and the customer service aspect of it. And I look forward to sharing that with the viewers today.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jeremy. Daryl, over to you.
Hi, Leah. I'm Daryl Thompson. I'm a restoration manager for Ungerman. Ungerman's been in business for 47 years, and we've been involved with TPAs for several years. I joined the team about 7 years ago in the mitigation department. So over the last 8 consecutive years, we've been a top performer for Contractor Connection. In that same amount of time, we've continued to grow. We've gotten involved with different other TPAs. Last year, it culminated with we won the top honor for Contractor Connection for mitigation, something that we're very proud of, but we work really hard to maintain that status.
Amazing. Thanks, Daryl. Josh, over to you.
Morning. Thanks, Leah. My name is Josh Bachman. I currently work for Viola Management, which means I've moved over to the consulting side of things. But at the beginning of my career in restoration, I started, 2001 back in Texas with a contractor that was 4 miles down the street from USAA's world headquarters, which meant I jumped right on board with Contractor Connection, which was then called Prism. So I've been doing the TPA dance for a little while, understand that. And then, to 2012, I made the move to where I locally am here in Chicago. So Texas, Chicago restoration contractor, and then about 4 years on the consulting side.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And last but not least, Phil. And Phil, I don't know if you saw, but Amber said to say hi. Tell your dad she says hi.
I saw that. Yes, Amber, I'll do that for you.
It's my wife.
So
Yeah, right.
she likes me better, Josh. Sorry, yeah. No, my dad. Yeah. Anyhow, so I started out in disaster restoration, just graduated high school, 1988. And I spent 10 years as an operator. And I sat in, during those 10 years, sat in every seat in a restoration company. Like to say everything but mobile remediation, because back in the late 80s, early 90s, we called that demolition. So things have changed a little bit. At the end of that, my father sold the company. I spent a little stint with the acquiring company, and then he started Business Mentors back in 1997. I hopped on board with him that next spring as his business partner, and I spent the last 27 years traveling around North America, helping restorers create a vision and a plan for their business, help them identify where they're going, and then walk them through the process to get from here to there. And in that, I've worked with hundreds of restoration companies. Some of them we help get into TPA work, and some of them we get out, and others we just help navigate and help them assess whether it's a good fit and then how to be successful within that.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I think everyone can agree, and somebody in the chat has already agreed. This is an incredible panel of experts that we have here today. Before we get started, we're going to just launch a poll. The name of this webinar was TPA work, is it painful or profitable? So you'll see a poll that's launched. I want you to just throw your opinion in there. And while people are submitting their opinions, if the panel wants to just talk about what are some of the pain points that you hear about or you experience when it comes to TPA work, let's just throw out a list of what are the pains.
I hear profitability all the time.
Profitability, margins. Daryl, did you have something?
Timelines. Sticking to the time.
Oversight of somebody who's sitting in a seat 17 states away, who has gone to an ISCRC class and knows better than the contractor on site.
Okay, I think that everyone is, the poll is done. So Kristen, if you want to end that poll and share the results. So it looks like we have 71% saying that it's painful and 30% that it's profitable. And we have some comments in the chat that that there should have been an option for both. So any comments on these? Is this a surprise to anyone on the panel?
No, but I would hope that after today, we're going to see that there's some ways to make it profitable and a whole lot less painful.
Agreed. Thank you, Daryl. That is a great segue. That's what we're here for, is how we can turn the pain into profits and just make everything.
Hurts so good. Hurts so good.
Exactly. Okay, so we're going to start with our first discussion topic, which we've talked about is profitability or margins. So this TPA, the margin squeeze, so strategies for profitability. This is a big topic and we're going to cover it off really, really quickly. But a common complaint or pain point with TPAs that we hear about is this squeeze on restorers' margins. So Phil, I'm going to start with you. What are the typical margin differences that you've observed between TPA jobs and independently sourced or direct work?
So the answer is depends. One of my favorite. So one of the things that you find is that I'll just say we did a really big deep dive into one of the national players and had looked at thousands and thousands of jobs that they had done and did analysis of margin by job type, by referral source. And it was interesting that out of all of the different, if we could categorize them, the lowest one was the TPA, and it was lower by a substantial amount. It was still profitable, but it was lower. I don't know if I want to get into all the exact numbers, but if you looked, I think there's a couple things that play into that. The first one is, on average, the typical TPA job is smaller. It's a smaller job, and so if you think about a smaller job, and you just take one extra trip to a store to go pick up some missing lumber, or you forgot an air mover, or you had to go travel back and forth, and all of a sudden you have another $75 cost or $150 cost, it all of a sudden changed your margins by 2, 3, 4 points. And so being efficient on the jobs that you're doing and really dedicating resources and thinking about how do I get from here to there, and being deliberate in how we manage projects would be very, very effective. And trying to figure out how you balance a $250,000 job across town and a $5,000 mitigation or a small repair or restretch on carpet and some patch and paint, it's going to be tough to put them in the same basket. And so thinking about these jobs a little bit differently, maybe dedicating different resources would be extremely helpful in that process. And so that's where the pain comes in. We try to treat it like every other job. And so you have to think, yeah, maybe I need a different response from my TPA type programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we'll be diving into some of those different ways that we can respond throughout this webinar. Jeremy, from your perspective, what factors contribute to these lower margins on TPA jobs compared to other work? And Phil already mentioned like different types of jobs. What are there differences between mitigation and repair or rebuild?
Yeah, I think as a restorer and an operator, you have to understand the rules of engagement, right? So again, relationship business is a different segment of business. If you have a relationship with a property manager, an adjuster, or an insurance agent, and that's how you engage your business, and that's how one revenue stream comes in. The TPA business, you sign up for it, right? So you kind of understand, like, I'm signing up for this avenue, for this revenue, and it's understanding the rules of engagement. So for us, we've always been very successful in understanding the guidelines and the rules. And then I think another common theme that you'll hear today is training, right? Training staff to understand that. I've always had really good success in almost segmenting the business, where you have relationship business or maybe commercial business to one segment, and you've got dedicated staff that deals in the TPA circle. And if you do understand it, where it's not maybe just an afterthought, but if you're truly going to sign up and understand and engage and want to execute at a high level, then it can be profitable, right? It's understanding, maybe not to say a loophole, but maybe there's a line item entry or something outside the guidelines that will put maybe more profit into the company, into your pocket. And so it's understanding that. And then once you do understanding that, it's executing and being profitable, being successful, and then also not getting too frustrated. It's very, very frustrating. They may change those rules, every 6 months or every year when they do an annual review or they do an audit. And so it's then going back and understanding the rules of engagement have changed. How do I take that? How do I train my staff on that pivot so that way we can all be successful?
That's great. Daryl, I have a question for you. How at Ungerman do you track and analyze the profitability of your TPA work? And what are the KPIs or metrics that a contractor should be monitoring to stay on top of their profitability?
Yeah, for us, we're going to track our profit basically the same way, whether it's a TPA or a non-program job. So we're going to we are going to track the job costs, obviously. We're going to track the referral fees. Each TPA has a different referral fee. What is our expected profitability and how do we line up with that? What's our material and labor cost variance? What does insurance allow for those materials? What's the actual labor cost? How can we make that meet more? We're going to look at productive hours versus total hours. What's the driving time? How does that figure into all of it? Something else that comes up, what does our company allow for overtime hours versus what does the insurance allow for overtime hours, and what are the regular hours worked? How long is the job in progress? The longer that job takes, the less it's profitable. So we try to keep track of each of those metrics on every job.
That's great. Josh, over to you. What are some strategies that contractors can implement within the TPA guidelines without compromising the quality or service in order to protect their profitability? The big question.
It's kind of a broad question, lots of areas you go. But I think I'd go back to some of the things that Daryl is bringing up, and I think part of it comes down to just making sure this goes. The answer goes for work, whether it's TPA or not TPA. I think it's just really working at profitability and making sure we're staying in there. But I look at it from the perspective of, if I expect to work 8 hours on a project, are we really working 8 hours on this project, right? Just making sure that we're maintaining our efficiencies. What happens if that bleeds and becomes 10 or 12 hours without much change to the scope? I think that's something that we tend to do. It's not that big a deal if it just has to delay until tomorrow. Well, in the TPA world, it becomes a very big deal very quickly. Kind of going back to what Phil said about the job size shrinking in the TPA world, I think that's very true, which means that our not just margins are different, but our margins for error are different, right? We have to be very careful about what we're spending, how we're watching things, and I think those strategies hold true whether it's in the TPA world or not, but I think they become just a little bit more focused or micro-focused on it in the TPA. And I think, if we're running a good business, then we could be profitable inside the TPA world.
Great. Jeremy and Daryl, because you guys are sort of living and breathing this in the field every day right now, can you share any specific examples of things that you're doing to protect your margins? could be some of the things that we've already talked about, but is there anything that we've missed to protect those margins?
Currently, at our 2 locations, we like to have a single point of contact. So for this, maybe the smaller TPA jobs, if you will, we like to have one person that takes the lead in the loss or the assignment that is provided to us. And it's more of a write and run perspective. And so that way it's one person that is responsible for how they position the estimate, how they negotiate the scope, how they come to an agreed price, and then actually how they manage the back end piece. So it's not a shared responsibility, it's a single responsibility. And so I have seen that through my career when that is done in the TPA business. And again, it's all on how you are set up to operate. Not everybody operates that way, but I think it's easier to have one person that's accountable, responsible for the profitability in your organization rather than sharing it with multiple people.
I think what he's talking about is also dependent on how many TPAs you're a part of. If you're part of one TPA and your workflow is very steady, then having that one point of contact can be really good. When you start getting into more TPAs, then there's going to be these different requirements for each TPA. And so your needs change. And so for us, we are a part of several different TPAs. And so we have staff that is specifically trained on each one of them. So it can be the admin to the estimators. Even our field staff is trained on each of these TPAs so that everybody working together, we're going to get the documentation in a timely fashion, make sure everybody knows what's going on. Again, that efficiency is going to be key to maximizing our profit. And so having the right people in place is huge.
Bill, Josh, anything to add to those strategies?
I think the only thing I would, I'm sorry, Bill. The only thing I'd add on there, Leo, would be that it can be a little bit different when you're at a smaller company. Jeremy and Daryl both represent a little bit larger company staff that they can devote to that. When we're a little on the smaller side, when I look back in my career to some of the places I was at the beginning of my career, that we kind of just looked at me and you had to keep up with it. I think it's just getting organized, right? It's the same thing as you do in the documentation role, just making sure you get yourself really organized, whatever that looks like. If it's a binder on a shelf, just knowing where that is and how it's organized. But nowadays I've used technology to help me work through that, but just getting yourself organized so you can keep up with what the latest and greatest is.
Well, one of the things that I see inherent in each one of these plans was data. Having good data and information in your company. And so knowing job costing, knowing your key metrics on projects, knowing your different categories of jobs, whether it's just it's a pending, it's an intake, it's a startup, it's a completion, it's collection. You've got to have the systems that allow you to track multiple jobs at the same time and know the status. So you're not digging into sitting down there in the morning and saying, okay, gosh, what did we get? What do we have? What do we have to do in each day, figuring it out? It's something that needs to be in front of us. And so if you're going to be successful in this world, you've got to have good job management, good data management, whether it's your job management program. A lot of people use Dash or PSA or Encircle or whatever program they're using. Get good at that part of it. As you roll out the TPA, it's going to make your life so much easier. And then it's going to help you manage your metrics and data. The nice thing about all the TPA work is they have a scoreboard. And you know how you're doing. You know how you're doing immediately. And so you internally should be doing the same thing so you can keep up with this and so you can control your company and be in the driver's seat or be aware where maybe it's slipping so you can catch up and do so quickly.
Yeah, as you guys were chatting, I was just writing sort of a summary of the themes that came out of that. And that was one of them, Phil, is that knowing your data, keeping your data all in one place and having access to it, staying organized. The other big one that came up was training in order to be more efficient. So before we move on to the next topic, I'm going to just take a couple of the questions that have come in. There's been quite a few. And some of them I'm going to save a little bit till later because they are a bit more general. So I'm going to keep the ones specific to this topic. But for Jeremy and Daryl, if you're able to share, what are your average margins for TPA work? That came in from one of our attendees.
Daryl, I'll let you lead with that one.
It changes. So we have three different divisions that are part of the TPA. So we have our repairs, we have mitigation, and we have contents. Mitigation is the highest because it's the most labor intensive one. And so we don't have a whole lot of supplies and costs that would go into what the repairs does. So repairs is probably out of the three is the lowest. Contents is right in the middle. They'll average anywhere from, you know, our goal is around 35% for repairs, and then it goes up. And if we can do 40, 45, 50 for contents and in that area for mitigation, a little higher for mitigation would be good. And so that's what we work for. Not every job is that way, but it does work out averages.
Jeremy, anything to add to that?
No, I would echo what Daryl said. It obviously it changed by the line of service. And so that's an accurate reflection of kind of where we're at. And those kind of are our target gross profit percentages as well. And we are able to be consistent in landing the jobs, whether it's, restoration or mitigation in those numbers.
Great. Okay, in the interest of time and my promise to everybody that we would be done in 90 minutes, I'm going to move on. But before we do, any final tangible takeaways of things you want people to know about with managing that margin squeeze? I'll leave everyone if you have one takeaway.
Do it right the first time.
Do it right. Sorry.
Do it right the first time.
One of the things that, do it right the first makes a big sense. Not everybody measures profitability the same way. My administrative team, my estimator, my project manager, my vehicles, my equipment, are there costs to those? Yes. Do people track that? Not very consistently. And so margins is a different story. And so, if we're coming out and saying we're going to make 80% profit margin, no, you're not. You have all these costs that you're not tracking in there. And so it's a conversation that your answer can be very, very different based on what your inputs are. And so that's something to think about. And it's really about the margin dollar at the end of the day. And it's about your net margin at the end of your business, at the end of the month or at the end of the tax year. And those are the things to take into consideration because there are costs that don't get costed into jobs all the time. And they're real costs.
Mm-hmm. Josh, any takeaway from the margin topic?
No, I think I just add on to what they were saying. I think job costing or that margin conversation is very, very specific to your company. It's hard to throw that around. I know it's one of those things we always want to talk about, but to Phil's point, we don't do a great job at tracking some of the other things or the indirect things that go into that. We have to be very careful about how we talk through that. So just take that with a grain of salt as you're comparing margin to margin.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy, final word, final takeaway in this topic?
No, I think pretty much what the rest of the guys said. I would echo the same thing. Okay.
We do have one more poll that we're going to launch. So we'd like to know, it is related to the topic of margins. And one of the pain points that we hear about is pushback and things not getting paid for that are on your estimate. So on average, what percentage of line items get pushed back on TPA jobs? So we'll just give this a second to come through. If any of our panelists have any comment on this topic, feel free to jump in. Looks like it's
gotta be careful not to lead the poll.
Exactly. It's like we're watching a racehorse right now as the results come in, but it's pretty spread out across the board. Let's just give it okay. Perfect. So it looks like 11 to 25% is 36% of the group said 11 to 25%. Any comments on those results of pushback? Is this surprising to any of you?
No, I think it's kind of where I would expected it to be.
Okay. So we will.
One of the things I find with our pricing programs, they're fairly predictable. And so there's some tools that we have that, whether it's QA Assist or Ask Amy or other programs, that when we're writing our estimates and we're writing our bills, we can capture a lot of things that maybe we wouldn't have in the past. And if we found that, and we've got 10, those programs will tell us where we're inside the program guidelines or outside the program guidelines. Actionable insights, all these programs that will suggest items that maybe we're missing and tell us areas that we're maybe violating the guidelines. And so we've got the kind of the answer book in front of us in a lot of ways. Doesn't make it perfect, but I think it takes away some of the challenges on pushback and allows us to get accurate estimates, because with each of those programs, making sure you have all of the inputs or all the unit costs in there is going to be the difference between making 32% and 38%. That's some of the detail. It's really being diligent on what's there and what's not there, and then being able to support and document it, having the files, having the pictures, having everything that basically backs up what you're doing makes your job a lot easier. It doesn't mean there's no pushback. It means that sometimes you're going to be able to fight the pushback, and sometimes you have to succumb, and you got to figure out which ones you want to fight to the end, and which ones you want to be a little more say benevolent on.
Mm-hmm. Daryl, it sort of comes back to that, get it right the first time, does it not? If you get it right the first time, you're not having pushback. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, and I think we even get into a little bit more on some suggestions on how we can get it right the first
Yeah.
time. But we absolutely, I saw some of the questions flying by. One of them was, who gives you the guidelines? It is the TPAs, but the carriers are also heavily involved. And so each carrier may be a little bit different. USAA is going to be a little different than State Farm. And so having individuals, estimators know what those carriers' requirements are, and then include the TPA requirements. It's tough. It's a hard job, but getting through that initial learning, that initial training is huge in trying to get that done right the first time and make sure that profit is maximized.
Great. Okay, we're going to move on to the second discussion topic, which I know we've talked about previously. This group is the administrative burden and having those dedicated resources, so that time and resource drain on the company or the resource requirements. So contractors often report, as you guys have already, significantly more paperwork, documentation, and reporting requirements with these TPA jobs. Josh, what are the most common administrative challenges people are going to encounter with TPAs, and which tasks are going to consume the most amount of time?
Yeah, in my experience, I find that what we recognize most is that it feels like there's an overhead burden there on just having somebody being around to pick up your phone and press a button, right? And so I think there's some burden that we associate with the TPA or the program work, where they're asking us to push buttons that we normally don't have to push in our normal process. But I might argue that if we actually took some of those processes and brought those out to our non-TPA work, that might make us actually a better functioning business. That was the approach that we took at the companies I came from, was, hey, let's look at the most stringent program work that we're on. Let's try to run our company that way anyway. And it actually turned out to make us better outside of the program work as well. So I look at it, yes, it is a burden, but it's also a place that can make us a little bit better as we go throughout business. The only challenge I might have there is asking questions of the programs. I know there are a couple of programs out there that ask us to fill out some things that really seem kind of outside the box, right? I don't want to be specific here and kind of pick on any one program, but there's some job tracker things that go on. And my question has always been, is anybody looking at that data when I'm entering it? Or is that just going into someplace? Those would be the places that I push on a little bit. If it's valuable stuff like pressing a button that says when I start a job, I think that's fair, right? Because I want to know inside my own company when I start a job anyways. To tell the TPA that doesn't seem like it's that big a deal. But if you're asking me to do it in 4 other platforms at the same time, that's when it gets a little ridiculous. And so I just look again, I think I said it earlier in one of my responses about being efficient with that. And I think that's what I look at from this admin role, as well as just finding ways to be efficient with the admin of the program as well.
Jeremy, what steps do you or can some of our attendees and other contractors take to overcome some of the administrative challenges from the outset?
Sure. I think from an owner operator too, I think, we all have to understand and acknowledge, like if you want to do business through in the TPA space, like you have to sign up for it, right? So at the end of the day, there are more layers, there are more challenges. I believe it is more of an administrative burden if you wanted to, execute at a high level. And so again, we do have dedicated folks just for that. So understanding that, I think as a leader, as an operator, it's, hey, listen, these are the rules of engagement. Let's understand that. We want to be excellent. Let's compete in this space, right? Because at the end of the day, through the administrative burden, if you can execute, I think Phil had commented about it, like there's a leaderboard, right? So there's a leaderboard for your area, for your state, by the TPA. And if you're a competitive group, you can take that. You can understand that, you can train your staff for operational excellence, and then you can scale your business. So I think that's really what it is understanding that, leading your folks, understand, listen, we're jumping into this. There's going to be some challenges, and how can we tackle, how can we conquer those challenges so that way we can benefit from it.
That's great. Daryl, we talked a lot about the assigning specific staff, training. Can you give some specific examples of the staff and resources that Ungerman has dedicated to managing those TPA requirements? What does that staff, what does their skill set look like, and how has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, for us, well, that's an interesting point. As far as it evolving, I think before COVID, it was a lot less regulated. It seems like there wasn't as much remote estimating. Now it's all field adjusters, and then they use the TPAs to get the information they need as quickly as they can. Well, now everything is got to be documented quickly. And so our techs, they haven't changed their field work that much over the last 10 years, but all the admin work has changed drastically. And so what we did when we started getting really heavily involved in the TPAs is that we got a program compliance manager that helps all our admin staff stay on top of what's being required. Again, each of these TPAs is a little different. So all of the different requirements are being met by groups of these different admin teams. So we'll have estimators that are specifically assigned to a different TPA. We have a concierge that is assigned to a TPA. We have these different support staff trying to help. Our accounting team knows about the different TPAs. So we're all working together to try to make those TPAs as successful as we can. And as far as the admin part of it, it has just continued to evolve. It's gotten much more detailed. And the fact is, it's going to continue to get that way. We have to be one step ahead as far as our speed in getting them the information they need.
Phil, so we've talked already a lot about training and educating our teams and working together. So it's a big topic that comes up when we talk about the admin requirements. How do you recommend tackling training of teams to efficiently handle specific requirements from TPAs? Where should someone start?
Yeah. Well, they should start by all understanding what the key metrics and benchmarks are. They should know what's expected, and then they should know how to influence those numbers, because we're not doing the work as an admin team. We're reporting on the work that was done. And so there's two things. The first one, and this isn't a training issue, but there's a lot of companies I work with, and they have an admin team that's on call. And if a call comes in on the weekends, that admin team is doing the data entry and putting things in. I think there's great tools. Know-how is a great tool that's going to identify what the key benchmarks and key points are that we need to be addressing and hitting. I think some basic understanding of the work that we're doing is important. Getting out to a job site. If you're an admin person, how many water damages, mold remediations, probably not too many black water, but how many projects have you gone and actually seen? So you can interpret the photos you're looking at. You can interpret the field notes and know what it takes and what it means. And then I think that one of the important things that many restorers do not take is doing a debrief. sitting down and saying, how are we doing? How can we improve things? If we have a scoreboard up there and you say my number is 7 and I want it to be 5, and make up that number, whatever it is, how do I get from 7 to 5? What are the steps that I do? And then measuring those things and talking about it as a team, maybe with your field techs, maybe with your estimator, with your project manager, whatever it is, to try to figure out how do we move the numbers collectively so we can get better at these things. And so some of the learning is just internal, learning from ourselves, learning at our systems and process, and saying, what does world class look like?
That's great. Jeremy, you have a lot of experience in growing and scaling companies. What does training look like in your organizations, and how do you handle that, like initial training and then ongoing training as you onboard new staff as you grow?
Sure, we've done it a few different ways. From one of the companies, we had a university, and so as we onboarded folks within the organization, we would have them run through a training period of maybe 60, 90 days, so that way they could understand not only just the parameters in the TPA world, but then also I think, to Daryl's point, the different TPAs, if they're going to go to one TPA or another, depending on how they're going to support the operation. And then we actually use a shadow period as well. So after they come in and do the seat time and understand maybe, the service level agreements, the different KPIs, then they're able to go in the field, right, and actually get hands-on to see how the impact of maybe hitting metrics or control points in the different estimating platforms that report back that eventually impact your score of how you're going to be scored maybe monthly and annually. And so that's how we've done it, and done it successfully in the past.
Great. I'm going to take a question from the Q&A, because the questions are flying in. So I'm a little concerned about being able to get to all of them. But Josh, I'm going to send this one to you. Is there any training for estimators that you can recommend that will assist with writing estimates within the TPA guidelines?
Specific estimate training, yeah, that I think Phil mentioned a couple of them earlier, right? Through Actionable Insights, through some of the other vendors that are out there. There's a lot of remote estimating that's out there right now as well. I've taken a chance to have some estimates sent to a remote estimator, bring that back as an example of kind of some best practice, and brought that over to my team. I mean, I don't want to be a salesman, but we do an estimating class. I'll away from that one, but we have one as well that's got some tips and tricks in that world. So we've got some things there. But yeah, I usually, rather than go to a class, I think there's a real world kind of thing. I like throwing it out to somebody that's an estimator that's got a good track record that I can learn from, whether it's internal or external. Go out to some of the resources that are out there. They're going to show you what the best practices are for the industry. You can learn a lot that way.
That's great. Thanks, Josh. This question can be for anyone who wants to jump on it. What percentage of your revenue would you say typically warrants the need for a dedicated employee managing the administrative work for TPAs?
Percentage is a tough way to put that, because I think it's going to be based on how big you are. So if you're doing $500,000 worth of work, you can't have 3 employees totally dedicated to it. Matter of fact, you can't have 1. I think you have to look at your business. All this comes into your business strategy, and just first starting out and saying, okay, I'm going to look like this in the next couple of years, and then modeling it out from a financial perspective. You have to look and say, can I make money at the end of the day on this? And I think in the chat, I've been looking at a couple of things over here. I'd love to address a lot of them. I know we won't get to them, but one of the reality is the insurance companies are pushing their administrative burden to us, and then charging us for the privilege of being able to do that work for them. That's a reality. And so you have to look at from a financial perspective. And my suggestion is you start putting it into your cost of goods sold, your administrative time, and making sure that on a job by job basis, you set yourself up to be profitable. And so it's per $1 million in sales. I think you can look and say, okay, for $2 million of sales or $1 million of sales, I can have an admin person in that role to help facilitate that. But it's gonna have to work out on the paper first. You have to know your numbers well enough to be able to make that decision from a financial perspective to make sure that you created a sustaining business, not a money losing business, because that won't last very long.
Mhm.
And
It's
can
a
I
common
add
answer,
then?
isn't it?
Go ahead, I was going to actually ask you a question, but go for it.
I just wanted to say, to be patient. It does take some time to build up your team. It takes time to build up your business. You have to, you start out lower end, trying to figure out if this is the direction you want to go. And so as you continue to build and you see the growth potential, that's when you start building your team. You won't have, 6 admins ready to go on day one of the first time you're dealing with the TPA. That doesn't make any sense. It's build your team as you go along, and you determine what your needs truly are.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Daryl, the question I'd like to ask you and Jeremy real quick around this would be, aren't you two guys actually finding now in today's environment, though, that the administrative burden or the documentation requirement is starting to be similar outside the programs as it is inside the programs?
Oh, 100%. Every carrier is wanting the same readings. It does not matter about the TPAs. State Farm, USAA, they all want the same exact information. And so the TPAs just want it in a more defined way than perhaps an adjuster does. And so they have those parameters that we have to work within, but eventually you're going to have to get the exact same information to an adjuster.
Yeah, and I think that's my point, Daryl, is that the burden has increased over the last, call it 5 to 10 years that I've seen in the industry, where I think it's very similar now for the work inside the program work and similar to work that's outside the program. I think there's been an uptick in that level of documentation that is going to be required to get you guys paid. I mean, you two guys are living it. I just kind of experienced through my clients.
And I would say too, on Phil's comment and also Josh's, I think you have to model it out. And I think we can all agree, even to what Daryl said, like it's always changing, right? So even when you model it out and you try to map it out from support standpoint, like we don't know what the landscape's going to look like in the next year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. And so with that, you got to be fluid. You got to come back maybe annually and say, listen, there's these additional requirements being pushed back on us. So now we may have to hire another person, or do you split the responsibility with someone else so that way you can be successful?
Awesome. This is generating a lot of discussion. I don't know if you guys can see the chat blowing up, but it's just in the corner of my eye. So there's definitely a lot of passion and energy. And so I hope that we can do right by everybody and cover everything that they want to see, that they want to hear about today. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the promise of steady work and versus dependence and control on direct work. So the allure or the appeal of TPA programs is this potential for a steady stream of jobs coming from the TPA, reducing the need for extensive marketing and sales efforts. Daryl, what percentage, and I'm sure I think the answer is going to be, it depends on every business, but for your business, what percentage of your business comes from TPA programs? And what is the balance that you guys strive for at Ungerman?
So with us, again, we've been doing it for a while, and so we've built it up. So this isn't for everyone, but for us at Ungerman, we are at about 65 to 70% of our job leads will come through a program. So that could be for repairs, that could be for mitigation. And the reason, that's a really good number for us because we are so involved in several different TPAs. So we like that workflow. We want to keep the steady stream of jobs coming in. And so we use TPAs to do that, to accomplish that. And so for us, in our business model, that 70% range is really good.
Okay. Phil, I believe if I'm remembering the RAA cost of doing business report, it was around the industry average is around 40-45%.
Yeah,
remembering it correctly. So Daryl, a little bit on the higher side of that scale. Jeremy, same question for you at your business. What's your mix like?
Sure. And I'll answer from a Jenkins Enterprises pre-acquisition and joining the ATI family. We were probably the same mix as Daryl, like 70-30. And then ATI in a larger organization it's probably closer to 20-25% of their residential business. But I would say, you know, in the landscape, it's interesting depending on how you track it with your CRM and how it comes in. You know, sometimes those numbers in the TPA work is it's a little skewed or a little off. And the reason being is listen, you may have an adjuster relationship, and maybe it came in as a lead, as a call-in, and so you've met the individual out there, you've written the scope, and then they decide now they're going to send it through a TPA, right? Because maybe their management or, you know, and so, you know, with that number, it could be a little bit off. So it just depends on how you manage, you know, your incoming opportunities within your organization as well.
Phil, I'm going to come back to you. Sorry, I jumped ahead in my notes. What are you seeing in the market right now when it comes to striking the balance for, let's say, for somebody who's starting out versus some more experienced shops like Ungerman and ATI? What are you seeing as that balance between TPA work versus non?
And who's that directed at again?
Sorry,
I'm reading
Phil.
the quotes over here on the side. Okay, it was. Okay, so I apologize, dead air. The balance is company dependent, and it's what you feel comfortable with. And I'm reading some of these questions on the side over here. You got to realize that TPA work is not for everyone. There's some bad TPAs, there's some good TPAs. There's some bad TPAs for you, and there's that same one is going to be really good for Jeremy or Daryl. And it's going to be based on the type of work they send you, your marketplace, the companies they're working with, their auditors, the people looking through the files. There's some really bad TPAs out there, and there's some really good TPAs out there. And so if I'm in a position where I'm beholden to them, and it's essential that if they go away tomorrow, my business sinks. And if I'm in that spot, that's a really, really bad spot to be in. I want to be in a position where I'm in control. And if they tell me to do something I don't want to do, I can tell them, you know what, this just isn't working for me. But if I'm so stuck into these programs and I've got 75% and I've got it with one TPA, that's a dangerous spot to be, because they can go away overnight and my business just sunk. And I've been working with companies over the years, that was their reality. And then it's like, oh my goodness, what do we have to do to keep the lights on? And so take a look at your appetite for risk, take a look at your strategic plan, and then balance it out. If we know that the margin is a little lower with our TPA work, then why don't we deploy our marketing resources on the other side of our business to say, how do we get other direct work? What's our good SEO program? How do we get it through the internet? Are we getting commercial work? Do we have property management companies? Are we working with municipalities, fire departments, whatever it is? We got to look and say, okay, let's segment our marketing program to meet our company's needs, and then let's create a balance in there. And one of, I don't know if this is a good math or not, but I always figure that if you had about 20% of your work or less coming from a single source, and you've got everything else covered, you're going to be in a pretty strong position in your business. And so strategically, I'm going to look at my marketing program and say, okay, I want more TPA work or I want less TPA work. And one of the things you also have to look at is it quantity of jobs or is it revenue, dollars? Those are two different numbers, because my non-TPA work might be $1 million job. And so most of my revenue is going to come from my non-TPA stuff, but most of my jobs and my keeping my equipment out of the door and my employees working is my TPA work. Whatever that looks like, you have to look at your business, make a business decision and say, does this make sense? How am I going to manage this? What is my best strategy for my business? And then when you figure that out, then you can start adjusting. And there's a lot of people, maybe would start with Daryl and say, I'm doing 70%, and that makes me really uncomfortable. I want it to be 50. So you need to sit down with your leadership team and your marketing team and say, what do we need to do to move this number from 70 to 50? And really, I don't want my revenue to change on the 70. I just want everything else to grow. If that's your strategy, that's going to be healthy. That's the approach you might want to take. But to just sit there and say, okay, I'm doing this all day long, every day because it's coming at me and I have no control over what I'm doing, you're making mistakes in how you're managing and running your business. And that's where some of these discussions where I'm sitting over here with these people have real issues on the right side of my screen. I don't know where you guys have it. It's right side of my screen with all those questions. They are, if you're there, you might be stuck with this insurance company TPA program, and they're yanking you around and you don't have any control or choice on what you're doing. And so I think that that's where you need to make smart decisions in your business. And yes, it can be really profitable. It can be great work, but not always.
Lots of great advice in there. Thank you, Josh, how do you evaluate? Now, Phil mentioned that there was good TPAs and bad TPAs. How would a contractor go about evaluating whether or not a TPA program is a good fit for them and for their business, and what should they be on the lookout for?
I really think, Leah, it goes back to everything we've talked about in this whole webinar up to now, which is what's personal for your company and what KPIs and metrics are you watching. Phil mentioned it, and I couldn't agree more, right? There's a TPA that's going to be great for Daryl and not great for Jeremy, right? Based on the locale, based on who's working it through, based on who that reviewer is that's sitting in that desk in Columbus, Ohio, or Jacksonville, Florida, right? So that's kind of where those things are going to be. I think it really comes down to a personal decision, and I'd go back to just looking at what you're trying to do as a successful business. What are your metrics and your keys for success? And then evaluate whichever TPA or whichever program you're doing, or whichever referral source you're looking at against those metrics, and make sure it makes sense for you. I think it really becomes an individual choice for what's going to happen. Because I think if me and Daryl and Jeremy were sitting around talking shop around which ones are the best, we might all three have a plan. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that's some of the questions that have come up in the chat is, which one is the best? What do you think about this TPA versus that TPA? And I think there's going to be no right or wrong answer. It's going to be, it depends, which is not an answer that anyone wants to hear, but that's the reality. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next topic because time is flying. So with TPAs acting as an intermediary, some contractors experience or feel that this can create a distance from the end customer that makes it challenging to create the same level of customer service. So Daryl, how do you find that TPA work affects the relationship between you and the homeowner or the customer?
I think for the most part, most homeowners know that they're involved with the TPA. They get introduced on the initial calls. They're worked with that TPA. TPA knows that they're representing the insurance company. We're coming in and saying the exact same thing. We're working with this TPA and we're working with your carrier. Back to Josh's point is that there's still all that same information that a carrier is going to need. And so it really truly doesn't matter too much to a homeowner if it's a TPA or the carrier, as long as we know what we're doing, we're collecting the right data, we're getting the right photos, we're getting all of that taken care of. It's about building trust, at least in our experience, it's about building trust with the homeowner, that they trust us to be that conduit between the homeowner and TPA/carrier.
Jeremy, how do you ensure that your company's quality standards and customer service standards are upheld when you're working a TPA job? And how do you address any potential conflicts?
Yeah, this may seem a little old school. I think probably one of the pain points for Daryl, myself, Restores, probably a lot of the people in the chat, maybe the reviewers, right? The estimate reviewers. And, when you're able to build a relationship with maybe an adjuster or a decision maker, if you're in the commercial sector or property management sector, that, they're going to be on board and maybe bless your scope and your price, so on and so forth. I think Josh had actually alluded to it. The reviewers, they may be sitting in headquarters. They could be a complete remote employee. And so I think that's one of the most painful points is the reviewers. And the question is, are they knowledgeable? Like, what's their background? Do they have training? Are they managed correctly? And so I think we've all experienced that. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to build relationships with the reviewers. And can we build that from a remote perspective? Can we try to communicate effectively so we can all get on board, so that way we're not cutting things out of the scope and estimate that are required in order for us to deliver excellent quality craftsmanship and then also the customer experience.
Great. So Josh, how can contractors ensure their reputation remains strong and good in their community when working under the requirements of a TPA program? Any suggestions or comments there?
I think we always talk about the old cliche of bad news travels fast, but I think good news actually can travel as well. And I think going back to what Jeremy said, if we can build good relationships, that word travels fast, and folks will get to know that we're somebody that's good to work with. I never wanted to get the reputation to be difficult to work with, and I think it goes back down to me. And I know we're in a world now where everything's remote. We've got technology. We're texting. We're using platforms that are web-based to do all those kind of things. I still think that if I want to take that customer service level up one notch, maybe going back to Jeremy's point, I go old school and pick up the phone and make a phone call to these folks. It sounds crazy. When I've actually had a personal conversation, I'm going to get a much better response than I am over trying to type something in an email. I know that Jeremy, Darryl, you probably both typed that email that you've then deleted, and done that. It's much different when I pick up the phone and have that conversation. So I think make it a little more personal. I think goes a long way into keeping that reputation in a place where I become somebody that's quote unquote easy to work with.
Great. I apologize, guys. I'm skipping a couple of the questions that we had planned because I'm going to jump over to some of the questions that have been coming in. So bear with me. I'll try and keep us on track. I'm just going to scroll and essentially just pick a question because there's 100. So
I'm gonna grab one really quickly that I saw my name on twice, and so it's when you get a job outside marketing resources that come in, and then it goes to a TPA, and then you charge double for your marketing. I got my marketing fees and I got the TPA fee on top of it. It really stinks. I will tell you the first thing. Here's an endorsement for RIA. Last year at the RIA event, they had 4 managers of TPA programs. And I don't know whether they've been able to do anything with it, but each one of them was asked that very same question. And each one of them, 4 major TPA players, said, hey, you know what? That doesn't seem reasonable. I think that if you got the work, we shouldn't run it through our program. So there is some loosening up on that. I think our advocate in the industry is making moves, trying to change that and adjust it. Now, whether that's happened or not, I doubt it. And the one thing I also look as a skeptic in the audience saying, well, they're still managing the job. They're doing work. We can't expect them to do the work for free, although we got the work somewhere else. So how do we make sense of that? I think that it's adjusting as time goes by. And there is some understanding on their part that, yeah, maybe we need to be a little have more discretion in how we charge that. That doesn't mean that they're doing that right now. It means that they're open for it. They're open to it. They're considering it, and they understand our problems as well because they understand we're business people. And so, Chip, yes, I understand your question, and no, I don't have an answer for you right now. But I think that maybe join RIA, get involved with the AGA, take a look at the white papers, see if there's some resources that can help you in your business. Because it's not fair in a lot of ways. It is what it is at this point, and we can make some adjustments and changes as life goes on. So, is that a good non-answer?
That's great. I mean, it's another plug that the RIA annual conference is coming up in less than a month. So, if you aren't planning to attend, it would be a great opportunity to learn more about the RIA, and I'm sure meet Phil there and ask your questions in person. Okay, we're almost through our topics. A lot of the things that I had planned to ask you about have already been covered, so I'm going to sort of jump around a little bit, so bear with me. But we're getting into the sort of the meatiest part of it, which is just how to be successful on a TPA program. We talked a lot about there's a scoreboard, there's a leaderboard, and the work is going to go to those with the highest scores in that service area. So understanding requirements and their scoring system is critical. Darryl, I'm going to come to you because you are a top performer with Contractor Connection. What are the most effective ways to find success within a program to make your way to the top of the list? So can you get really specific with how to climb the leaderboard?
First, you have to have the team that's willing to meet all of the metrics that the TPA requires. They require them. We know that sometimes it's going to be difficult, but here's the requirements to get a good score. Score with the TPA is going to be everything. If you can have a good score, they're going to keep giving you a lot of work. So what's your customer contact time? Are you in the top percentage for doing that? What is, I wrote some down, the estimate upload time. How is that in relation to others in your state, in your region, and even across the nation? Unfortunately, sometimes, but the reviews matter. So work hard at making sure that when a client gets a review, that they're giving you all tens, hopefully nines and tens at the very least. But those matter. And so the more that we can do to be in front of those, the better off we are. The estimators need to limit the bold back reviews. That's where it goes back to picking up the phone. If we can do that on the front end, if you get some review comments and you make those changes and you can do all of them up front, your scores are going to be high. If you keep getting more bold back reviews, if you start getting to arguments with the reviewers, your score is going to drop and you're not going to get as much work. And so really it's a matter of cooperating with the TPA, knowing ahead of time that that's coming, and then being willing to follow through. It will get you more work.
Great. Jeremy, you've talked about picking up the phone, you've talked about building relationships. Are there any other strategies or ways to build relationships with these with estimate reviewers at TPAs that you haven't? Any other secrets that you want to share with us to ensure long success with that program?
It's a challenge, and just I know it seems old school, but Josh and Daryl both touched on it. It's picking up the phone, it's trying to understand. Listen, an email or a note in an estimating platform may be interpreted a different way, right? And they may not understand your perspective. And at the end of the day, like, we're the expert. We understand. Listen, we probably have tons of people that are IICRC certified with Master Water, Master Fire here on the webinar today. And yeah, you have all the credentials and you understand all that stuff. And so it's trying to communicate the best way possible, maybe to the reviewer, to say, no, this is what needs to happen and the process needs to happen this way, and that's what reflects my scope and estimate. And so it takes time. It's when you have folks that are remote employees, maybe they don't want to answer the phone the first way. And so it's a little bit of patience. But I think also from an operator standpoint, or from an ownership standpoint, I think you've got to be intentional. Daryl talked about the different metrics. We've talked about the leaderboards, creating that environment of competitive excellence. And so, if you have a GM, or if you have a TPA or an MRP manager within your organization, or if you're a smaller mom and pop shop, right, where you're involved in the TPA game every single day, like, be intentional with your time, spend time on it, prioritize it, and then push that down to your staff so they understand it. And then what we like to do is, when we're on the leaderboard, or if we're not on the leaderboard, we use that as a motivational tool and tactic to, hey, listen, this is where we need to be. The guy down the street is in third place. Like, I don't want to be in third place. Like, how do we get to second or first, or how do we win that award?
That's really great advice in there. Go ahead,
If you don't mind,
Josh.
I'll add on to that. I think you can also make it personal at the TPA level. Like, here's an example. Like, if you're on Alacrity, go to the Alacrity conference, right? Get involved with that. Pay attention to what's going on, because you're signing up to play the game. Go find out what the rules are.
It's really great. Phil, are there, you've mentioned a number of specific technologies and processes that contractors can implement. Are there any others that you think people could look to have more success with TPAs? So different technologies, SOPs, things like that.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that's going to change pretty radically in the next several years in the industry. It's changing right now. Documentation, whether it's DocuSketch, Matterport, Magic Plan, all these 3D imaging that allow you to show. So those are good technologies if the insurance companies can open the file. So I think that's one of the things you have to talk to the insurance company, say, can you access if I send it to you? So now all of a sudden you have really, really good job documentation of pre-existing conditions, of the conditions when you got there and what you did and saved when you were working on the process. There's the equipment is starting to provide readings from the field, so we're not going to have to go in and log everything. Our equipment's going to start reading back to our software systems, and what we're seeing is that there's a lot that are starting to work together, and so you don't have to have 5 different software programs. You have one where you're going to do some level of data entry, and communication is going to go back and forth. And so whether it's Kahi or DryTrack from, I think it's DryTrack from Phoenix, the equipment itself is facilitating that. And so whether it's imaging or the equipment and our readings, it's our time, if we're time tracking or if we're tracking our vehicles, and we can substantiate where we were and when we were on the job and the time we'd spent there, all of those things will help support what we're doing, and they're going to take less time, not more time. But realize I just talked about, probably there was 17 different technologies that addressed each one of those points I just talked about. Not all of them are going to work. Not all of them are going to work for you. And I think you need to be deliberate. It's sort of like saying, I'm going to do TPA work. I'm going to be on every one of them. Probably not a good choice. I'm going to take on technology, and I'm going to have a platform that makes sense to me and my business, gets me the data that I need, helps support the jobs that I'm doing, helps document my job sites, helps support my billing and increase my billing. And the other thing I'd say also is take a look, Josh mentioned it earlier, take a look at virtual estimating. You know, in the old days, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, an estimator could write $2, $3, $4 million worth of work. Today, I've seen estimators that are writing $15+ million worth of work because we took away all of their downtime, all their windshield time, and we've been able to speed up that process, provide better data, better information in a more timely manner, and it's saving us money. We're not so the amount of time we're spending on what used to be the highest paid position in the company, and now on a per claim cost, has come down radically because we're utilizing technology. So once again, a plug for RIA. Go to RIA, go to one of the trade shows. Go if you want to be on Crawford, you want to be on Alacrity, go to their shows, walk the trade show floor, see what technology is out there, figure out how it integrates into the systems that they're requiring, and see that it makes sense for your business. And then create a task force in your company and say, okay, let's find 3 technology platforms that are going to make sense for our business, save us time, save us money, save us steps, and speed the job cycle time.
That's great. I will do another shameless plug. Encircle will also be at RIA, so come and talk to us on the trade show floor. But we did a survey a couple of years ago, and you talked about a task force of choosing technology, and we found that the most successful buying of software, there was 2 to 3 people on a team on a software buying committee. So good point to just not to have one person tackling it, but bring multiple people in. Phil talked a lot about the future, and this group, we when we met last week in preparation for this, we talked about sort of the elephant in the room, which is AI. So I'm going to just ask your opinions on where you feel AI is in your business today to help you drive efficiencies, and where you see it going in the future. Jeremy, I think you had some ways that you're leveraging AI in your business today.
Yeah, so it's not mandatory, but some of our estimators and project directors, when there's a question maybe on why something needs to be charged, or a scope or a line item, we're able, some folks are leveraging AI on the best response or a different response, and how to approach that and how to submit that to support our position.
Anyone else want to jump in on the AI topic?
For now, that's what it seems like it's been very beneficial in, is that communication, whether it's emails to, clients, customers trying to get paid even. I mean, we use AI for all of that communication. But it's going to be real interesting to see where AI goes in the next few months and the next couple of years, because it's so fast paced right now. Things are changing so quickly. What's going to happen? How is this going to make the estimator's job easier? And so we're anxiously awaiting all of that.
I think AI in a lot of ways is a game changer. One of the things we in the discussion we had earlier is, if you're not using AI, the good news is all of the software companies that are supporting your business in the industry are doing very, very heavy investments in AI and how it enhances their platform. So you're getting the benefit of AI, even though you may not be understanding it. The other thing I just suggest is that have your management team keep it open on their desktop. Keep open whether ChatGPT or Grok or one of their other platforms, and just something you just wrote up, push it through AI and see if it cleans it up, see if it makes it better. See if as you work on strategy sessions, it's remarkable how much AI knows about our industry and how many reports or information, how much information you can get from that. And so play with it, see how it works. And then there was a friend of mine in his restoration company. One of the things he did is he understood that his technicians in the field don't have good communication skills, and things they were writing up really didn't make sense. And so they actually have this process where the technicians in the field are sending their notes through AI before it's posted to the job site, because lots of people are reading those notes. And it's good to have somebody who just having better language and better communication skills. That was a pretty cool recommendation. Like, wow, that's a good idea and a good use of AI that doesn't really take much time or effort or energy.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add on that I think we might be missing here is we've talked about AI in the sense of going out to an AI chat and having some conversation with it that way. I've started to use AI from an efficiency standpoint where I use Copilot as the flavor of the month for me right now. And it's sitting alongside, since I'm already a Microsoft shop, it's sitting right alongside all of my Microsoft functionalities. If I bring a spreadsheet of data in, right there with inside that platform, I can ask AI to help me analyze that spreadsheet. And it's really nice to have that partner to do those things with me. It sits alongside of my Outlook right now, and it'll go through. I mean, I've probably gotten 15 or 20 emails while we've been on this webinar, right? And I can ask AI to go through, summarize for me real quick, and come back with a report on which two I probably need to respond to first. That's a nice thing to gain some efficiencies, and I think that's the way we need to start looking at it from a business perspective.
One of the questions that just came in while we were talking about AI, I'm not sure who wants to try tackling it, is how are TPAs leveraging AI, and are there any specific directives that you guys have heard of from carriers or TPAs in the use of AI?
Insurance companies are data machines. They have more information on our business, our industry, the different areas we're making money, losing money, or inefficiencies, where we're costing extra money than we know or have in our companies. So no, they're using it to basically squeeze the margins, to squeeze where the money's coming from. I'm sure it's happening. And so because insurance companies are data companies, not insurance companies, they're parsing that information and they're getting as much as they can, and they know about every marketplace, every average job size, every claim size in a 1978 single family home with a concrete floor than we'll ever hope to know. And so yeah, they're using it, and they're gaining understanding of the insurance market, the restoration market, and our individual companies on a very specific intimate nature. I don't know that. I'm just making it up, but I believe it to be true.
I think that could probably go back to the comment we made at the very start, which is about understanding and knowing your data and having your data organized, so that you as a business can be, like Josh said, ready to run Copilot and be able to interpret your data and leverage the tools from technology providers like Encircle, like the other ones in the industry who are going to be being able to bring solutions forward. So just really knowing and organizing your data will benefit the restorer. Okay. For each panelist, when we think about the future of TPAs, if we look at what it is today, if you each had your crystal ball, what are your predictions for being successful, for a restorer to be successful in the future of TPA work? Daryl, I'll start with you.
I think you need to be proactive and not reactive. And so if there's ways that you can continue to grow your business, you want to do that. When it comes to AI, those kinds of things, again, be proactive. It is sometimes, if it's not in our wheelhouse, we're not real comfortable doing it. Technology can be scary. So then we don't look at trying to get better at it. And that can't be part of this conversation. We have to get more comfortable with these changes. And so whatever that means with AI coming on board, we want to take advantage of it. So whether it be in our work practices, our admin practices, or AI practices, we want to try to be proactive, be a leader, and not just try to catch up.
Jeremy, what are your predictions and recommendations for future success?
So, along the same lines that Daryl just said, forward thinking. I remember when I first started in the industry over 25 years ago, like I would go out to a loss or to a lead, and I had, a tablet of paper and a pencil and a tape measure. And I'm not saying that can't be done anymore, but when you talk about efficiencies, cycle times, all the metrics, especially in the TPA world, like leverage technology. I remember when Matterport first came out, and just, you can either shy away from that technology, or you can embrace it and understand it, and then how do you integrate it into your day-to-day business. So when you look at Matterport or DocuSketch, all of those things are AI. How do you use that? How do you understand that? And then how can you leverage that into your own business? And then, depending on, I think the laws of scale, Phil mentioned, I think somewhere around an estimator used to, your top performing estimator at one point in time would write $3 to $4 million as an example, and now it's at 15, maybe million annualized, because they're able to leverage, technology, or maybe, engage a remote estimating service. Even at ATI, we have a centralized estimating team. So if our folks, if they get inundated with the day-to-day, like if they can't get 1 or 2 or 3 estimates turned around in a timely fashion, now we can leverage, that efficiency within our own organization, so we can turn it around and hit the SLAs and all those metrics and cycle times.
Great. We're going to pivot now to away from the future and to the here and now. We've had a lot of questions come through about how do I get started? What are my first steps? So we're going to just sort of go back to the basics, if that's all right with you guys. Jeremy, I'm going to come back to you. Is there sort of a checklist or a mental checklist that a contractor can go through to know whether or not this is the right path for them to TPA or not to TPA?
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to the beginning of the entire call. That's just a decision that they're going to have to make. If I was a restoration contractor and I'm looking to add, to my current portfolio or my different revenue streams, I'm going to do some research, right? So let me go out. Some of the guys have mentioned some different TPAs, Alacrity, Contractor Connection, so on and so forth. Go to the marketplace, do your own due diligence, right? Understand how they interact. Do they interface and interact with current carriers that you do business with? And then, you can go on and understand the guidelines, and then you'll have to make a decision, not only from, hey, listen, I want to jump into a TPA, but understand, when we talk about modeling, we talk about what's going to be the financial burden to the current business in order to not only get maybe onto the TPA and maybe get some assignments, which are not just going to come in right away. It's going to be a commitment of a couple of different years. Daryl talked about how Ungerman, it took them time, right, to build into the different TPA models and to be successful in each one of them. But understand, it's not going to happen overnight. So as an owner operator, you're going to have to do that diligence. You're going to need to map it, model it out, understand what the financial responsibility is going to be to the business, understand which TPA is going to be the best model for you and the way that you operate. And then you can go through the application process and see if you get onboarded.
Great. So we are at 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we still get to some questions. So I'm going to throw it out to the panelists. Final advice, your experience, your expertise to the people who have joined today, whether they're considering joining a TPA or considering growing or considering backing off of their TPA work. What final advice, key takeaway do you want somebody to leave here from you today? Josh, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Leah, I think I would start with saying that I'm going to go back to the beginning of our conversation. I think it was Phil who said it. TPA work's not for everybody, and I think it's important that we recognize that. My concern, and going back a little bit to the crystal ball thing, is that I have a concern that there's a shift in the industry. And I think it's foolish if we don't recognize that there's a shift in the industry, and then we have to figure out how to answer that shift, right? I come from a time very similar to Daryl, Jeremy, and Phil, where deductibles were $250, and so people called me when they had a puddle on the floor. Now that deductibles are $7,000, they're thinking differently about how they're going to do. And so if I want to be in the $5,000 residential water mitigation world, I'm going to have to be cognizant that there's going to be a program involved there. Some of my other referral sources are starting to change in how they do that. I mean, I look at agent marketing and seeing how that changed. It's just shifted and changed. It's not dead, it's just changed. And I think that's important. If anybody's going to walk away from this, I think I'd walk away with, it's not for everybody, but I think you need to pay attention to it, because I think it's not, I think it's going to be here. It's not going away. We have to know how to use it and use it well.
Daryl, over to you.
I just wanted to pick up on that. I think if you've got a mitigation restoration company, it's a good opportunity to grow your business in pretty quick timelines there. If you're more in repairs, that may not be something that you want to get into right away. But with mitigation, it allows you to move quickly. And so if there's anything to take away, is be prepared, know what you're getting into, know what the requirements are, and then have your team in place to be successful.
Mhm. Jeremy, I'll throw it to you next.
Yeah, so from a team perspective, like Daryl said, like if you're not prepared and you do jump into the TPA space and you do not perform well from a metric standpoint, the way that they, record your performance and the way that they rate you, you really only get maybe one shot initially at getting the business, and then you're going to kind of have to sit in time out until you can demonstrate that you can deliver at a high level. So at the end of the day, we just have to understand, like, the TPA's client is the insurance company, and so if you can't execute and deliver at a high level for the TPA, they're going to find someone else to do the business. So I just think that that's something that you need to consider as an owner operator as you maybe go down this road, and maybe you're not doing TPA business. Maybe you want it to be 10% of your business or 20% of your business. But as you map it out, just understand that you do need to spend the time in building out the staff, so that way when you do get your chance at it, that you do it well.
Phil, I'll give you the final takeaway.
Boom. Okay, so the first one, here's a shock to most people. The insureds are happier when they have a managed program job. When they're working with the TPA, the insureds are happier. And so if the insureds are happier, the insurance companies are going to push more work that way. So it saves them money. The customers are happy. They get more renewals. The contractors don't like it as much. The insureds do, because they're clueless on handling an insurance claim. It's every day for us. It's once every 10 years or once in a lifetime for them. And a managed repair program takes out some of the unknowns to them. And so realize that that's a point. Leveraging on what Josh said. Josh said the average deductible is going up to a percentage of policy as opposed to a set amount that's can get absorbed into the job, or we can waive it or write it off, or you can move the contents and work it out. That doesn't exist anymore. So the reality is our jobs are becoming more cash dependent. The customers are more focused on what the job is costing them, where they can save money. And so that being a reality, we got to take a look at this a little bit differently, but so do the TPAs. If they understand that their average job just disappeared because it's a cash out, they're going to the areas where they're going to continue to be able to propel their business. So they're going to commercial, they're going to large loss, they're going to different areas that they didn't exist before. Maybe they're going to do something like Home-E, where they're doing kind of the managed residential small repairs on things that are cashed out. And so there's different avenues that we got to start looking at, and the insurance companies are looking at things differently as well. TPAs are here, they're relevant, they're necessary for the insurance company and for the clients. And so it's not all bad, it's not all good, it just is. You have to figure out how it fits and works for your business, and then be deliberate about whatever strategy you take on and how you go after your strategy or execute your strategy, and then sit down and look at what you're going to do consistently. every year or more frequently, are we doing the right thing? Do we want to do more of what we're doing? Want to do less of what we're doing? Do we want to be more relevant to the TPAs? Do we want to have better scores? How do we go about each one of those things? And then think about our business as a serious strategy, or with a serious strategy, so we know that we're not being yanked around by somebody else's urgencies or desires. They're ours. It's what we wanted, and then we're in control.
So I'm going to try and grab a couple of questions from the chat before we wrap up for good today. I am curious. I apologize to Logan. I have not kept up with the thread, but apparently Logan is a hero in the chat today. So I'm really curious to go back and see what Logan's been talking about. So Logan, we may need to chat and get you on a future Encircle webinar. So watch your inbox. Josh, there's a question that came in from you, or for you. If you're running your business at the most stringent guidelines, are TPAs still trying to cut your invoices down? And how do you overcome those objections?
I think the easy answer that nobody's going to want to hear is yes, you're still going to have some interactions, but I think it's knowing those rules and just setting up to play those rules. If they say you can't get an emergency service call, you signed up for that contract. Know that they say that, don't charge for it. You know, I mean, that sounds simple, but I think that's kind of the way that I ran it through. I just found ways to be profitable where I didn't have to charge for an emergency services contract, right? The estimate is a tool for me to communicate my scope. And the better I am at translating my scope into an estimate, the better I am going to be being profitable.
Great. I have a question. I think this will probably be for Daryl and Jeremy. How do you get the TPA to actually use you or send you business? I signed up a month ago and still haven't received a job or a suggestion for a good TPA for a contents company. But let's start with the first one. How do you get that first job once you've signed up?
Jeremy, you might have more experience with that.
I can't share that, Leah. No, I'm just kidding. I would say, you know, with the different TPAs, right, and in the onboarding process, and it sounds like maybe that person is a contents restoration specialist, maybe a soft goods or a dry cleaner. I'm currently not in the dry cleaning space, but for them, the TPA that onboarded them, they have a district manager or a regional manager from that TPA, and I would encourage them to reach out to that individual, try to develop a relationship there. Have them come to their office, to their operation. Hey, give them a tour, show them, you know, what they're able to provide, and then see what they can do by taking them back to their portfolio of insurance companies to see where they can maybe activate them.
There's a number of questions that have come through about specific TPAs and how do you choose the best one. I know that I believe the survey may be closed now, but there is a TPA scorecard coming out. Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is through the RIA.
Yes.
So that'll be a good source of information to sort of start your journey in researching which one may or may not be the right one for you. We are going to have to wrap up, so I'm going to just give some final housekeeping items. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today. And thank you for everybody for attending the webinar. I know that there was hundreds of questions that we weren't able to get to. That just tells us that there's more opportunities to get restorers together, to get experts together to help answer this question and better the industry and help everybody be successful.